More than a dozen staffers with the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, are reportedly leaving to join the organization founded by former Vice President Mike Pence.
This is the latest development in what's been a tumultuous past few months for the Heritage Foundation and its president, Kevin Roberts. Roberts announced the mass exodus in an email to staff that was obtained by The Hill. It says in part, "This weekend, most of our staff from our legal and economic centers are departing immediately. We wish them well, though the manner of their departure speaks volumes."
Those who are leaving will be joining Mike Pence's nonprofit called Advancing American Freedom, which he founded shortly after serving 4 years as vice president. The move is another setback for Heritage as it continues to deal with the fallout from Kevin Roberts' controversial defense of Tucker Carlson back in October. Carlson was under fire for interviewing the far-right commentator Nick Fuentes on his podcast, but Roberts defended Carlson in this video. Let's take a look.
We will always defend truth. We will always defend America, and we will always defend our friends against the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. That includes Tucker Carlson, who remains, and as I have said before, always will be a close friend of the Heritage Foundation. The venomous coalition attacking him are sowing division. Their attempt to cancel him will fail.
Roberts quickly faced heavy criticism from his foundation's employees and donors and faced calls to resign from his position as president. He eventually apologized for the remarks, but there's been more reports of growing discontent among staffers at the foundation for months. Some are reportedly upset with Roberts for aligning the foundation more closely with the Trump agenda, especially on the issue of tariffs.
Online, some viewed the staff departures as another sign of fractures in the conservative movement. Ilya Shapiro, a director at the Manhattan Institute think tank, writes on X, "Anyone who thinks the folks who left Heritage are never Trump or whatever don't get it. This isn't about Trump or Vance for that matter, but whether the conservative movement stands for something or is a cesspool fit for all sorts of bigots, conspiracists, and Qatar firsters." Others, however, were quick to brush off the departures. Sean Davis, co-founder of The Federalist, says, "Great news, perfect example of addition by subtraction. Not only are a bunch of whiny malcontents who were only rowing backwards now no longer a problem at Heritage, the only jobs they could find are with a guy who has no future whatsoever in electoral politics or national policy."
Man, every day I feel like there's a new story, but it feels more like there's an internal civil war going on. And I say that before everyone's like, okay, the Democrats have soul searching to do. I understand that. Like, I look at them every day from the election loss and can see that. But more and more within the Republican Party, if we just look at recent events from Marjorie Taylor Greene deciding to exit her position, from the recent America Festival that we saw over the weekend put on by Turning Point USA, and how Ben Shapiro was attacking Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson has become like the name for division within the party. I know that the Heritage Foundation put out that video to try to quell some of that same fracture that Erica Kirk addressed in her remarks when she opened up the entire festival in Phoenix this weekend. And so I think about this is like about the old school Republicans versus new school, maybe populism, Trump Republicans. But then it's also about, and I think a really important part of this is that cesspool that they're referring to, of people that might be in any party, but particularly in this case, we're talking about within the Republican Party that do consider themselves racist, that say things like Nick Fuentes, that will, elevate speech that's hateful and, attacking communities for no reason. And I think that when you embrace that type of language within the discourse and act like it's normal, but like, oh, this other thing that they said is fine, but this stuff we're just going to ignore. And that's what many people accuse Tucker Carlson of doing by not really, and he's a great interviewer, and not interviewing Nick Fuentes in a very hard, steadfast way like anybody who learned journalism properly would do. Well, then you leave the door open for, well, we'll take some of the ideas, but then all these bigoted ideas we'll take, but we'll ignore. And then it ends up defining your party.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I assume you watched the Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes interview?
I didn't watch the whole thing.
Oh.
No, I didn't.
Well, so I did watch it, and I would say that people were taking issue with tone as opposed to what was actually asked of Nick Fuentes. And the reason that Tucker decided to do this interview is because despite Nick Fuentes being deplatformed for basically every major social media website, including YouTube, X, Facebook, Instagram, and having to go fully independent in the truest sense of the word, he's managed to get this massive audience. And so it's trying to understand why that's happening. And since then, Tucker has also talked numerous times about what he disagrees with Nick Fuentes on and why he is actually concerned about young people and them flocking to this type of content creator. And he also, in the interview, made very clear where he stands on the issue of anti-Semitism and racism and some of those views expressed by Nick Fuentes. And so that's why it's so frustrating to have these people at Heritage Foundation or wherever basically be upset with Tucker and disavow Tucker not because they're really upset with the interview, they're upset that he platformed Nick Fuentes. And clearly the deplatforming didn't work, so why not try something new and try to actually understand what this guy believes in and why so many young men are attracted to him, and try to suss out exactly why that's happening. And I do agree with what Sean Davis said about these Heritage Foundation staffers leaving. Before Kevin Roberts came on board, the Heritage Foundation was practically irrelevant. He has elevated the organization to a newfound status that they haven't had in decades. And to leave there to go to work for Mike Pence, who ostensibly is like gum on the bottom of the shoe of the conservative movement at this point in terms of his irrelevancy, I think just shows you that they're more interested in sort of writing white papers nobody's going to read about free markets than actually having a hand in shaping the conservative movement and policy conversation.
Well, I think there's two things. So first, with Nick Fuentes, I think and I've been somebody who's watched how and why people have been interviewed for decades. And so when Oprah, for example, has a member of the KKK on her show and calls it the most regretful decision she's ever made, it's because of that clear intent that maybe Tucker Carlson or somebody has to actually get to the bottom of why you have these thoughts in your mind, and this wide variety of people that are following these thoughts that are detrimental to whole communities. And so I don't need to sit and watch an entire interview to understand that he said many things that just lean all the way into racism or bigotry. And so therefore—
Fuentes or Tucker?
No, Fuentes.
Oh.
And so that's when you decide to platform people is what I'm saying. It's like, well, the thousands of people that follow him, at what point are people going to say and acknowledge that perhaps some of those people also have those thoughts, and then that aligns with the conservative movement? And the best thing you can do in those instances is then condemn those thoughts immediately and wholeheartedly. And so when some people move to, you called the former Vice President Pence the gum on the bottom of the shoe, but what he's doing is going back to some traditional conservative ways that still exist within your party. I mean, there are several people that still want to back away from supporting international countries, which is what his organization is looking at, like taking some support out of Ukraine. There's still some people that want to operate in free markets, that don't want to do these tariffs and move forward in this way. So outside of the people that are arguing with the Heritage Foundation regarding Nick Fuentes and anti-Semitism, there's a whole bunch of policy considerations that President Trump doesn't ideologically align with the historical Republican that still exists in the party, that are frustrated that he's just kind of doing whatever he wants, because that's what Trump has and always does do, whatever he'd like to do, as opposed to what his entire party is looking to do. This is why all the infighting's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there is a legitimate policy debate happening, but it's not like Trump came out of nowhere, right? He was speaking to a forgotten voter base whose concerns hadn't been represented by a politician in a really long time, and who didn't feel like either party was really speaking to their concerns. And so this populist movement wasn't just a personality called around Trump. There's actually a new Republican Party with a bunch of mid and low propensity voters who did not feel that they had a voice in the system. And so that doesn't just go away when Trump leaves, right? I mean, those voters have to go somewhere. And so the question, I think, for the Republican Party is more about how do we keep that coalition together and make sure that those working class voters who felt a new draw to the GOP are going to stick around. And if it's going back to the Mike Pence era of sort of more hawkish neoconservative combined with free market policy, those people aren't going to be interested in sticking around.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle for sure. Next on Rising, there's speculation that the U.S. could be considering adopting a new childhood vaccine schedule, but it could have some domino effects. Don't go anywhere.